hear the trebuchets before you see them. A dull thud, a whistle, a crack of stone on stone somewhere beyond the wall. You have not slept properly in 11 days. Your water ration was cut again this morning, and the enemy outside your gates has not attacked in over a week, because they don't need to. This was the quiet reality behind almost every medieval siege. The image most people carry is loud and violent, ladders against walls, boiling oil, screaming charges. But that was often the shortest, least common part of a siege. The real war, the one that actually decided who lived and who surrendered, was fought inside the walls, in silence, over weeks or months. Let's reconstruct what that actually looked like. A siege rarely began with an assault. It began with a blockade. An attacking army, often outnumbered by the defenders they were trying to starve out, would ring a castle or city and simply wait. The historian John Keegan, in his landmark study, The Face of Battle, argued that medieval warfare was overwhelmingly a war of position and attrition, not open battle. Pitched fights were rare, sieges were common, and sieges were won or lost long before any sword was drawn. Why? Because a castle is a machine for surviving time, and time has a cost. Consider the physical reality of what a castle actually was. Not a symbol of power, but a container. A sealed vessel meant to hold food, water, weapons, and people for as long as possible against an outside force that couldn't easily break in. Every design decision, thick walls, deep wells, storage vaults cut into bedrock, existed to answer one question. How long can we survive being cut off from the outside world? Some castles were built to endure a siege of weeks. The best supplied fortresses were built to endure a siege of years. The entire architecture of medieval defense was, in a very real sense, architecture built around a countdown clock. Every well or cistern inside those walls holds a finite volume. Every grain store has a countdown clock the defenders can calculate almost to the day. Medieval castellans, the officers who ran a castle's defense, kept detailed inventories precisely because they knew the real enemy wasn't the army outside. It was arithmetic. Picture yourself as a garrison soldier partway through a siege. Your job isn't glory, it's rationing. You watch grain sacks get lighter each week. You watch the well level drop after a dry summer. You watch children, because sieges trapped entire populations, not just soldiers, grow thinner. Fear inside a besieged castle wasn't fear of a single terrifying moment. It was slow, grinding mathematical fear. What happens on day 40 when the flour runs out? The Mongol siege of Baghdad in 1258 shows just how decisive this silent pressure could be. Hulagu Khan's forces didn't need to storm the city's full defenses immediately. They cut off its supply routes, broke its irrigation systems, and let starvation and disease do work that direct assault would have cost thousands of lives to achieve. By the time the walls were breached, the city's ability to resist had already been hollowed out from within. And disease was the second silent soldier in every siege. Cramped garrisons, contaminated water, and the waste of hundreds or thousands of people packed behind stone walls created conditions for illness to spread faster than any arrow could fly. Historians studying medieval siege mortality have repeatedly found the same pattern. Dysentery, typhoid, and other diseases of overcrowding often killed more defenders than combat did. A castle wasn't just under military attack. It was slowly being attacked by its own confinement. Think about what that actually meant day to day. Sanitation systems built for a normal garrison size were suddenly supporting several times that many people, along with the livestock brought inside for food security. Waste accumulated faster than it could be removed. Water sources meant to serve dozens now served hundreds. The same walls that kept the enemy out also kept every one of those problems sealed in with you. An attacking army rarely needed to introduce disease deliberately. They simply needed to wait for the defender's own crowded, straining infrastructure to do it for them. So what actually broke a siege? Rarely the walls themselves. Medieval castle walls were engineered to be extraordinarily difficult to bring down quickly. That's the whole point of a trebuchet. Essentially a giant counterweight sling capable of hurling a stone weighing up to 300 pounds over a distance of 300 meters. It sounds devastating, and it was, but stone walls several meters thick could absorb an enormous amount of punishment before collapsing. Breaching a wall by bombardment alone could take months, if it worked at all. What actually broke a siege was almost always internal collapse. Starvation reaching a breaking point, disease outracing the ability to bury the dead, morale cracking as soldiers realized relief wasn't coming. Sometimes it was betrayal, a gate quietly opened by someone inside who had simply run out of hope, or who had been bribed, or who calculated that surrender terms now would be far kinder than a final desperate assault later. Negotiated surrender was, in fact, the single most common ending to a medieval siege, far more common than a wall being physically breached. Both sides usually understood this. An attacking commander often preferred surrender to storming a fortress, because a successful assault could cost his own army heavy casualties, even in victory. A defending castellan often preferred surrender once supplies were nearly gone, because negotiated terms could protect the garrison and civilians from slaughter, while a final desperate stand offered no such guarantee. This is part of why sieges could stretch on so long. Both sides were, in effect, waiting to see who would run out of options first, and both sides knew that patience, not aggression, was the real weapon in play. This is the counterintuitive twist most people never learn. The deadliest force in a medieval siege usually wasn't the enemy army. It was time itself, working on hunger, water, sanitation, and human patience. Even the sources that survive reflect this. The military theorist Vegetius, writing in the late Roman period in his treatise De Re Militari, a text medieval commanders studied for centuries afterward, emphasized supply and logistics as the true foundation of military success, arguing that armies were beaten by hunger far more often than by the sword. Medieval commanders inherited that lesson and applied it directly to siege warfare. Why risk your men's lives against a fortified wall when you can simply wait for the people behind it to run out of bread? This changes how you should picture a defender's daily experience. It wasn't constant combat, it was constant calculation. How many days of grain remain? How is morale holding among the men on the walls? Has anyone tried to slip a message out for help? Has the enemy tried to poison the water source or divert the river that fills the moat? Silence outside the walls didn't mean safety. It often meant the enemy was simply letting your own resources become your executioner. And for civilians trapped inside, the people history often leaves out of siege narratives entirely, this slow war was arguably the cruelest part. Soldiers at least had rank, purpose, and ration priority. Ordinary families inside a besieged town frequently received the last and smallest share of dwindling supplies. Their war wasn't fought with weapons at all. It was fought at the bottom of an emptying grain sack. Imagine that reality stretched across weeks. Bread baked thinner and thinner as flour reserves shrank. Livestock slaughtered early, not out of choice, but because there was no longer enough feed to keep them alive. Wells rationed by the cup instead of the bucket. Chroniclers describing later famous sieges recorded people eating things never meant to be food: boiled leather, ground bark, anything that might quiet hunger for another day. None of that required a single enemy soldier to set foot inside the walls. The siege did its work simply by continuing to exist outside them. Why does this matter now, centuries later? Because the pattern behind a medieval siege, pressure applied not through direct confrontation, but through the slow exhaustion of resources, patience, and morale, is a pattern you can still recognize today. Modern conflicts, negotiations, even prolonged personal or professional struggles often follow the same quiet logic. The loudest confrontation is rarely what actually determines the outcome. It's usually whoever can outlast the slow, grinding pressure of time, resource, and resolve. You hear the trebuchets before you see them, but by the time you hear the walls actually crack, the real battle, the silent one, the one fought in empty grain stores and dropping well levels and desperate calculations of how many days are left, has usually already been decided. If this changed the way you picture a siege, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this one. And if you want to see what daily life actually looked like on the other side of that silence, inside a soldier's camp, between the marches and the battles, the next video is waiting for you.